Yo! Video games.
What up, dudes, and welcome back to the YoVideogames podcast. I'm Matt.
And I'm Andrew.
And once again, thank you to all our generous patrons who've kept us going for over 400 episodes.
Yeah, if you're interested in becoming a patron at any level, please check out patreon.com/YoVideogamespodcast. Due to the week is Graviton Dash. Thank you, Graviton Dash. I think close to new dude, not quite brand new, but been with us a couple of months.
Appreciate it either way.
Hope you're liking all that side quest content. Slowed down a little bit, but more will be coming, especially as we get more speculation about today's topics.
We're
going to try and balance it out with some positivity because
we need to bring a little more humor because I think we can be humorous. I think we're pretty good at it. But sometimes we get a little ranty or whatever, and the subject's a little too bummery. But it's a bummery week in a weird way. I mean, it's okay. So some really cool stuff's coming out. You got Rebirth coming out. You got movies. You got Dune 2 coming out. You got good stuff coming out this week, right? And Dragon Ball Fighters with rollback netcode comes out this week, as we just found out, and stuff like that. Ed and Street Fighter 6, for fighting it. All that being said, as we've been saying, and I can't believe we got so much kickback last fall when we made an episode about all the layoffs and that this is not good. And then people were like, we got some pushback on that. I'm like,
shit. We don't know what we're talking about.
Well, Sony laid off 900 people, shut down Sony London studio, gutted Fire Sprite, canceled their Twisted Metal live service game, and also had layoffs at Naughty Dog, had layoffs at Insomniac, which if Insomniac can't survive these layoffs, there is no God.
Pretty wild considering that Insomniac is floating them for most of this year.
Yeah. So I think even Guerrilla Games had layoffs or whatever. So there is no hope for this game. And then as we were going live, EA announces cutting 5% of its workforce, 670 jobs. So just
has
overall,
Nintendo announced layoffs?
No.
Yeah, good guy Nintendo.
Good guy Nintendo, which a lot of people, because people, and here's the thing, people kind of try to pivot over to like how Square Enix, well, specifically, which I think they're getting a little caught up in specifics here, but they talk about how Rebirth kept 80 to 90% of its staff from Remake. So then they made Rebirth, which is
very cool.
Like, this is the way you can, and yes, it absolutely is. But it's funny because I'm like, yeah, but this is how Nintendo's operated. Like, for years, like all of a sudden, like, good guy Square, like Square's learned it. I'm like, well, sort of. Yes, this part of Square has definitely learned the correct way of managing your teams and development of your games and all that. But it's like Nintendo and especially Monolith Soft, they've been doing this for years. Like this is their MO. Like,
yeah, I mean, not to say that Nintendo is like the good guy of the industry, but I do think their practices for like long term or longevity is the best.
There
in terms of the whole industry.
There is a caveat though, because everyone and I see this,
always a caveat.
I see this getting brought up because everyone brings up the whole thing where Iwata said, "Why am I going to lay off my developers? Why Iwata wouldn't do it? Nintendo doesn't cut it." And I've heard it like Nintendo CEOs don't do this. Where it's no longer even an Iwata thing. Now it's like Nintendo nebulously will never fire people. And here's the thing. About that year when Iwata said he wasn't going to lay off any of his staff and he was going to take a pay cut, he was doing what he had to do legally in Japan.
Right.
In Japan, it is actually illegal to lay off your workforce unless you have tried everything else, and that includes pay cuts to the CEO salary. In other words, there are two major things a company has to legally do before they can lay off workforce for downturn, right? So Iwata was one, just doing what he had to legally, but I'll give him credit. His response was immaculate, which is like, how can I expect them to make world-class games if they're at fear of being laid off. And Iwata was a developer, so I truly do believe Iwata personally did feel this way. And to add to that, they absolutely laid off a bunch of people at Nintendo of Europe that same year.
Yeah.
Where it wasn't illegal to just lay people off after, if you haven't tried everything else yet. So that same year, Nintendo did lay off employees, but they weren't devs; they were Nintendo of Europe people. So they cut a lot of staff out that same year. You think Iwata protected everyone, which he didn't. he protected his devs, which is probably the smartest people to protect, and he did what was legally obligated to do in Japan.
It's always curious to me that is a law in Japan, given like how little labor protections there are in Japan in terms of like being overworked and abused in the workplace.
That's the thing, Andrew. They don't want you to stop working.
Yeah.
It's not protection. It's like, no, you stay in this salt mine. You think, the company's doing bad, maybe I'll just get laid off and I could just I don't know, like take a breather for a couple of weeks or a month or a couple months. No, like we will legally make sure you stay at this sinking ship until all else has failed.
It hurts the soul a little bit. So I mean, we got to temper the good Nintendo with some annoying Nintendo, with the truly dark side of Nintendo.
Yeah. Well, once again, I feel it obviously needs to be reiterated. Nintendo is not your friend. It never has been.
Your
never
friend
will be.
Nintendo's my friend.
No.
If you're listening to this, Nintendo is not your friend, but Nintendo very much is my friend.
They are nobody's friend but themselves. So
invite me to things, Nintendo. I'm ready to sell out. Jesus.
Well, the big news was yesterday they're suing the creators of the Yuzu emulator, the Switch emulator, one of two prominently used Switch emulators. Now you might be saying, like, why are they doing this? They've already had this court case. Yes, they have, them and Sony, but they're attacking it at a different angle. They're saying that they were circumventing copyright protection. So they're going at it from a DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act angle, saying that, like, they're intentionally going around. Some people think they have a case. I don't necessarily think that they do, because the logistics of it are very much like that. They're saying that their main thing is like saying, well, the people who run Yuzu on Discord were telling people that, yeah, you have to get around, this thing. You need a product key to activate. So it's like, so basically what it is Yuzu, you can download the emulator, but it's not going to work right away. Like, you need to rip a game. And Yuzu doesn't tell you Yuzu does not provide the methodology necessarily to do this, or rather, it doesn't provide you any sort of easy way. But like, every cartridge has a product key. The product key has to be activated to run in the emulator. The emulator itself can't just throw a ROM onto it and it'll just read. Like, you need a product key to run a game ROM. And they have the Yuzu people on record, which is them screenshotting Discord, as we see in their lawsuit, screenshotting Discord, telling people, like, yes, you have to do this. So now Yuzu didn't provide people with means to it. They didn't provide them with a product key for a game. They didn't provide them with the game. They basically told them, you need to go get a game. You need to go buy a game, and then you can use this. You need they actually told them, you need a Switch, and you need the game. You need to soft mod your Switch, and then you need to basically rip your product key, through your Switch, through an actual Switch with an actual game cartridge. Now, there are ways around this, to be fair. Yuzu was not part of Yuzu's game, which is where I think that the court case gets a little murky. It's really going to depend on what judge, what jury, whatever, they're in front of here, because all Yuzu did was say, hey, this is how we have a Switch emulator. You will have to take a physical cartridge. You will have to generate, the product key from that cartridge, and you will probably need a actual Switch to do that. So you're going to need to buy a Switch and the game. Like, they had to, in my mind, they actually went out of their way to make it difficult to just pirate. But the thing is like, yeah, at the end of the day, people are just going to find ways around that because you can.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't want to. I'm not a lawyer. I've read maybe 10 pages of a single law book, and even then, it was about entertainment law, and that was wow. Um, just a little bit about contracts. So obviously I could be way off here, but most of this seems like they would need some sort of precedence, and they're trying to use copyright precedents, like copyright law. They're going to have to find somewhere a copyright case where this is, I, at least adjacent to what's happening. And I can't think of what, maybe music, where they're all like, yeah, you're gonna have to buy the CD and rip it off that, and they're gonna say like, oh, that's piracy. But that got protected, I think. Being able to rip MP3s off of a CD was protected under ownership.
Yeah.
Like you have a right to digitize your own media. So I'm not really sure how Nintendo's going to do this, but I don't even think that's the point, right? Nintendo's just trying to like clog it up.
Absolutely.
If they can just get an injunction against them to freeze operations, that's a
and
win.
That's also, and that too, yes, you've already kind of nailed, like, I think that the truth here, which is they want to stop and scare Yuzu, because again, we're 7 years into the Switch's life. The system's going to be is on its way out. This is its last year. Why now, right? Like, why not when this thing was big? And it's to scare people, I think,
for the next system.
It's to scare them for the next system. It's to basically say, like, I don't even care if we lose. I'm just going to put you out of it. I'm going to bankrupt you. I'm going to stop you from doing your thing. And I'm going to scare the living hell out of anyone from trying to attempt this on a new system.
Yeah, it sort of makes me wonder how easily accessible. Like, is their new system going to be entirely digital or something? Like, they're not going to have cartridges, so they're trying to like get out ahead of the.
Yeah, and adding to that, it's just kind of like, so what are the other things about this? Because their argument goes like this: that Yuzu provided the means necessary to pirate their software, and people did, of course. And their argument is that 1 million copies of Tears of the Kingdom were downloaded and played on Yuzu before the game came out. Which, this is where a lot of the big Nintendo bootlickers are kind of like jumping to Nintendo's side here, because corporations need defense. Where it's like, that's 1 million. They lost so much money. Like, where they sold 20 million. They sold 20 million copies of Tears of the Kingdom in a month. I think they're doing fine. I don't think they really lost much. But two, on the other hand, I'm sitting there thinking like, well, dang, Nintendo, why didn't you just release the game?
Right. Well, also, how many of those 1 million downloads turned into sales later?
Maybe, yeah. Well, maybe not. And then why did you the other snide part of me is like, well, why did you decide that you need this potato was going to be the go-to for 7 years? Like, why did you drag out this ancient tech that was so easy to emulate out so long?
Right. Yeah. Well,
it's not like there's a really big functional working PS5 emulator, let alone a PS4 emulator out there, or an Xbox Series or I'm sorry, an Xbox One emulator out there.
Yeah,
those are 10-year-old systems. Those are 10-plus-year-old systems. There's no emulator. Why? Because they're not potatoes.
Part of me is like, of course I understand why Nintendo's going after, like, they have a duty to protect their product in a way. I do think that this is the wrong way to go about going after piracy. And we've said this before ad nauseum, but just in case you're a first time listener, accessibility is the enemy of piracy. The easier it is to buy it and just have it digitally or whatever, the faster you're going to kill piracy. Steam is the number one weapon against piracy that we've ever had.
Yeah.
Right. That being said, like, yeah, all right, I understand why Nintendo's going after them the way they're going after them. I think it's maybe a waste of time and money But
it's definitely a waste of money too, because like, and then another part of their argument in this is that this spoiled Tears of the Kingdom for people a month before the game came out. And they had people they had screenshots of people's tweets saying like copies are out in the wild, try to avoid spoilers. I'm like, I don't think you're gonna sue on the grounds. I'm like, this spoiled the game. Like, one, it's Tears of the Kingdom. That story is a fucking child could have written it, and two, like you're gonna your argument for suing a company is spoilers.
yeah,
That's a weird thing. I hope I hope that's not. I really hope we don't win anything. You're spoiling a game or a movie. That's a suable offense. Oh, we better not be.
I don't know what precedents they're going to use here, and I'm actually genuinely curious how this progresses. But I do think I think it's all just one big stalling tactic to try and bankrupt Yuzu.
Yeah, because they argue again in their lawsuit that their Patreon doubled and tripled leading up to the release of Tears of the Kingdom. And I think the Patreon is probably where they're going to get the closest to like fucking over Yuzu here. Is that Yuzu was getting paid to update this emulator, which in turn provided pirates the ability to get the game early, play the game early, play the game at a decent frame rate and a decent resolution. But like the fact that they were earning money off of their work, this is where I think it gets this is where I think it actually gets murky and where it actually might get kind of dangerous for Yuzu in a way, because if Yuzu was not making any money off this, I wonder if they would even bring this case up. Because I think having a Patreon, an income source from this, and they make like $30,000 a month or something, for Yuzu, which is fucking insane to me. Like that's so much money.
Yeah,
like that's now. So I mean, it was even bigger leading up, like a year ago.
What is that, like $360K a year?
Yeah, well, that's now, imagine. But if you double, triple that, you're close to $1 million. Like,
yeah, that's wild.
That's a lot of money. I think that I mean, I don't know, because I said this yesterday too. I was talking to Max and Kenny about this, where I was like, I'm actually kind of scared because the politicians and judges in our country are legitimately stupid sometimes when it comes to technology.
Well, I mean, now Mitch McConnell's retiring. It was announced this morning, but how many of them have that red ring of death going on when they're just hearing about technology where it's just like they're not even trying to catch up. They're just like frozen.
Right.
Like, it's just, you can look in their eyes and you can see the little pinwheel of death.
The 56K modem trying to dial up,
like the last time that they were up on regulation for media and for technology was like radio.
Part of me wonders if like maybe this is like Nintendo's plan. Like, I'm gonna get a judge who's stupid, or not even stupid, just old and has no idea how this shit works. But I'm gonna build a really good case here, which is they're getting paid money to make something that breaks through my copyright protection and lets people pirate my games before they're even released.
Well, that's where they're going to get precedence, right? Napster is a platform that allowed people to get music and stuff, but I don't know if Napster made a profit. I don't know if like you paid for Napster.
Not initially.
I mean, Napster still exists now, so that didn't pull up what I wanted to know. I'm just wondering, like, there's got to be an in to get this to actually go to court.
I honestly think that, well, again, their in is they're trying to argue is DMCA and copyright protection circumvention. But that they knew there was copyright. They're saying that like the product keys that you were required to play a Switch game, that they knew that was copyright protection, and they provided people with the information that you have to go around it to do it. Like that they were outright stating on their own Discord that they knew it was copyright protected, and they told people that they had to break the encryption to run it on their product.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. We'll have to like wait for updates about how that's moving. Did it say in the articles like what state they were doing it in?
Oh, that's a great question. Actually, I don't know. My guess would be would probably be in Washington State, I would assume.
Where they're based, yeah, or Nintendo of America's based.
Yeah.
Because part of me is like, maybe they do it in, like, I don't know, Delaware. Isn't Delaware super pro corporation in all of its rulings and stuff? But
No, Rhode Island.
is that where Yuzu's based?
Maybe United States District Court District of Rhode Island.
Interesting.
Okay.
Because that'll have a pretty big effect.
It could.
Well, because if you have more corporate judges or more judges in an area that is more dependent on corporations, they're not technically putting pressure on the judge, but they're putting pressure on the judge.
Yeah. Well, again, I think their argument is just very much going to be the fact that users making so much money.
Right.
They openly told people you have to circumvent a copyright protection to run this.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. The users argument and users defense is basically like, well, we didn't tell you how to do it, and we told you you had to buy a copy of the game. Users defense is going to be, we told people they had to buy a physical copy of the game, and that the only way they could play it on our emulator was if it was a personally owned copy, owned copy that they are they're making a copy of an owned product. I think their argument is just going to be like, we told you you had to legally purchase the product, and then you could legally make a digital copy of that product to play on an emulator, which is legal. That's going to be their argument, which I think their argument works. It works enough for me. The problem is that, I don't know if it's a problem, but like, we all know that people are just, they're getting around this shit anyways. And it's not hard. And here's the thing. I said this to someone, online, like, sticking up for myself for our last podcast, where I'm like, we did a Google search, me and my roommate, a year or 2 years ago, to see how easy was it to find copies of Switch games before they're out. We tested this on Arceus to see if you could find it. And we tested, and I tested it to see if it would work. Or not to work. I tested to see if it would show up on a Google search.
How easy it is to find.
Guess what? It was a very easy Google search. We tested this weeks before Pokemon Legends Arceus came out. Xenoblade 3 came out in late July 2022. And in early July, I Google searched to see if you could find it, and I could find it. I could find Xenoblade 3 like ROMs. I don't know if they were like, I don't know how the keys were working exactly. I don't know how that works. So I don't know if it was like, I don't know how you would get it to run. Like, I don't know if they were like, there was like a key generator or something. I don't know how viable what I was seeing on Google search was, if you get what I'm saying, right?
Right. Yeah.
But I could Google search like ROM of Pokemon or Xenoblade or Zelda before the game was out, and I could see them showing up on Google search with within the first 5 to 10 search queries, you could find a site that was hosting something that was about the size of a Switch ROM cartridge. Now, granted that maybe it wasn't a ROM, maybe it was just 16 gigabytes of lesbian porn. Who knows? So, but all I'm saying is, all it took was a Google. Do you remember that back in the day on those share sites, like the Kazaa Bear Share?
Yeah.
The Doom 3 beta, where it was like 40 gigs or something, and then someone uploaded it where it said it was Doom 3 beta, and they had the exact same file size as the actual beta that was leaked, but it was just nothing but porn.
There was something similar happened with Modern Warfare 2. Like 2 or 3 months before Modern Warfare 2 came out, it was up on like piracy sites, and it was just 60 gigs of fucking porn.
Right.
Like, and we have a friend, I think, that did that got it, and that's how they knew it was porn. It was all like Russian porn.
Oh yeah,
which gets dark, by the way.
we basically knew Gold Roger as to that One Piece fan shout out. We knew someone who was basically the Gold Roger of piracy back in the day. He was king of the pirates.
Yeah. May still be. I don't know. Maybe
I don't
he's
know.
dead.
I haven't talked to him in years. But either way, my point is like it doesn't. Like to be frank, it didn't really take much to find what I assume is game files for these games, even before they came out. So yeah, in a sense, it's like it's not hard. Like people are definitely using the emulator, and there's definitely some sort of there is something out there where people are generating keys or cracking keys for these Switch games, which is not Yuzu, but is absolutely being used on Yuzu to do it. And I think that's going to be like the straight to the point. What is the argument? Is like are people using Yuzu to pirate Nintendo games? Absolutely. That's not even really the question. The question is, did Yuzu provide people means to do it? Or were they legally within their right to just be like, we made an emulator and we told you had to use a physical cartridge because you had to rip a key, but we didn't tell you how to rip that key. We didn't point you in any direction to rip the key. I guess that's really where it's going to boil down to.
So there's a couple of questions that this kind of leads into, which can be interesting, is emulation for modern consoles, for current consoles. A lot of the defense of emulation, or not even the defense, the reason for emulation is longevity of that library or survival of those games that, especially like NES and SNES and stuff like that, like they wouldn't really exist anymore without emulation. On a modern console that is still ubiquitous, what's the argument, like, so that you can play these on PC at better quality?
Here's my one argument, which is small. Granted, it's like people say, well, that's not much, but games on modern consoles, while the console's in the prime of its life, get delisted. And they may be digital only games.
Yeah.
And they get delisted, which means that game is gone forever and it was only ever available for download. And if you didn't have an emulator, you would never be able to play that unless you bought that game within that window of time that it was available. This happens a lot with licensed games, obviously. Now, again, like, that's not much. Like, how much is that really? I'm like, sure, but not really the point. I think the point is that, like,
I don't call it flimsy. I would say it's a flimsy reasoning for why you'd get an emulator of a modern console.
Well, the reason you get an emulator for
just
Switch,
the pirate games. That's why you fucking get it.
The reason you have an emulator for Switch is because the Switch is, again, a fucking potato that can't run its own fucking games correctly. That is why you emulate the Switch, because games don't even hit 30, let alone 60. The games don't even hit 720p, let alone 1080p. That's why you get an emulator. That's why you're using an emulator. So your games don't look like smeared, garbled messes and don't run like they're running on a TI-80 calculator. That is why people have them. And frankly, that's like, yes, like that's why that's why I could dig it up and show it. I have a physical copy, a disc physical copy of Breath of the Wild for the Wii U because I didn't get a Switch right away. I got a Switch a few months later, and then a year or two later, I played that copy of Breath of the Wild on Cemu, a Nintendo Wii U emulator, and it ran way better and it looked way better. Yeah. Again, I have every legal right to do that. I own the game. I own the system.
Right.
I only played that and Xenoblade X on that emulator. Those are the only two games I have on that emulator because I own 2 copies of Xenoblade X. Actually, no, I own 3 copies of Xenoblade X. So like those are the only things I've ever done. And all I ever did it for was just to see, well, what does this look like running at a better frame rate, better resolution, which would not ever be possible otherwise to do that.
No, that's true. I do think that that's the clear argument. Like if Yuzu can argue that is the reason they exist, to get better performance off of games you already own and no other reason, Nintendo will have no leg to stand on, even if that's blatantly false, which
I think that is. I think that's really what it boils down to. That is Yuzu's
the argument they're going to make. Yeah.
And it is blatantly false in a way. Like, people are definitely using it for piracy. 100%. 100%.
I would say the majority are. But that actually, you just said something that kind of leads into the next topic, talking about like the layoffs with especially EA, because EA even directly called this out. Licensed games, licensed IP that EA now is saying, like, along with laying off 5% of its workforce, they're going to sundown. I think in their own terminology said they're going to sundown a bunch of licensed IP projects that were starting, and they're going to move away generally from licensed IP.
Yeah.
And more towards new creative directions.
Which part of me at first was like, what the hell? What are they licensed? And I'm like, they're talking about Star Wars, aren't they? But I think they might even be talking about sports even. I don't know. I doubt that.
Well, didn't EA already move away from licensing?
They moved away from FIFA. It's no longer, it's like football club.
Yes, now it's like EA Sports EA Football Club or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's just FC 2024 or 2025 will be this year.
I think it's got to be Star Wars, which makes me nervous that they're going to kill that one that's basically finished. I'm blanking on the name right now, but it's the most exciting Star Wars game in years. It's like Rebel.
The Han Solo with a vagina simulator?
Yes.
That's at Ubisoft.
Is that Ubisoft?
Yeah.
I thought that was... Yeah, you're right. It is. Yeah, so I don't know then. I don't even know.
Fine.
Yeah. All right, then I don't give a shit. Otherwise, they were going to do another. They were going to do another Battlefront probably, because they're doing a re-release of the original Battlefronts, right?
Yeah. I don't even know if EA is actually doing that. I think that might be through
licensed out.
Else, I think. I don't know. Maybe it's EA. I don't know.
Farmed out. But then I can't think of a single, EA not in development anyway, right? They had Jedi Survivor or whatever. They're not gonna like kill the third. Well, I guess they would kill the third if they were planning a trilogy of that.
Of Battlefront, probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. Here's because they're saying like they don't see a long-term viable future for their IPs, right? Like there was some wording there that made it, in which this is why I think it's Star Wars. I'm like, Star Wars is not having a good run right now. I think Star Wars and Marvel are both kind of losing a lot of their casual audience, if you will.
Well, I'm looking at Jedi Survivor right now and seeing like, did it sell particularly well?
I think it sold decent. I don't think it blew the doors off.
Yeah, so maybe that's dead. That whole franchise is maybe dead.
I see you the Respawn trilogy, like the Respawn franchise.
Yeah,
because Respawn said they're doing a bunch of Star Wars projects, if I remember right.
They're doing not anymore.
Yeah, maybe not anymore, because they were going to do a first-person shooter, a part 3 to the I don't know, the whitest kid you know.
Yeah, Jedi Survivor was the one that came out last year, and then there was going to be a part 3, I think.
Right. Yeah, because they were doing like 3 or 4 Star Wars projects, which may not be happening anymore, like you said. And I think, again, like going back to what I was saying here, I think Star Wars is kind of losing its luster for a lot of the big casual audience. Same with Marvel. It's been a while since people rallied behind either a Star Wars or a Marvel movie. Like Guardians 3 kind of, but it was more of like a send-off. Like when was the last time you remember, like, John Six-Pack, John, Six-Pack of Pabst Blue Ribbon, getting really amped for a Marvel movie?
Number one, how dare you?
Whatever, dude. I don't care. You know exactly what I'm talking. Like, I'm gonna grab my truck and I keep my dogs in the back and I go to see that Star Wars film and it's really good and
you make jokes. Look, you make jokes about the rednecks, but the truth of the matter is every bit of innovation that's true American innovation was done at the hands of a redneck. Okay, I have seen a redneck shoot a beer by putting a bendy straw into the bottle of beer so that airflow just shoots the beer down your gullet. That's fluid dynamics, all right? That's fucking engineering.
I couldn't even pronounce fluid dynamics.
That's fucking... Hey, you don't need to pronounce the word to be a fucking genius, okay? So you talk shit. But the rednecks
Look,
are okay.
all I'm saying is Joe, you know, core 6-pack over here. He hasn't been excited about a Marvel movie in a while. And the same is true about Star Wars. There hasn't been something because people really love Mandalorian is great, you know, like, and people like Mandalorian came out, people were really into that. But that's kind of
Mandalorian was great for a few episodes, and then
and then it kind of, you know, then that kind of, you know, right, yep, right, and then like,
because it turned out they didn't have any ideas. What
mhm.
you thought was a style was actually them stretching a movie
Yeah.
into 2 seasons of a show.
And Obi-Wan was ass in a can, and like I said it would be, and
You know, Andor really is the only Star Wars property, what, in the last 5 years probably, that truly lived up to
yes,
its promise.
and some
And
of
even
these,
then, and
and even
then,
then, these Star Warsites were like angry about it because there was no lightsabers and there was no force and it was boring and there was tension and people talking, and it's like, it doesn't matter that it's like the best written and acted Star Wars has ever been. It's like, you know, I didn't get my bling bling, you know.
Stellan Skarsgård's monologue in that is the best written and delivered Star Wars performance
It is. It's
probably ever.
It's the best Star Wars has ever been written or acted. That includes the original trilogy.
Oh yeah, well, the original trilogy, especially the first, A New Hope, has questionable acting from everyone except one guy, and we all know who that one guy is.
Yeah, it's Alec Guinness.
Yeah, okay. He has a Sir in front of his name because he earned that on, you know, the stage. Uh, Not to say that I don't love it, and we made an entire series of questionable acting. I'm not saying
Yeah.
that ruins anything. I'm just saying that, like, for anybody to go like, oh well, it's nothing compared to A New Hope. The sequel trilogy has better acting than the original trilogy on the whole. Now, granted, Harrison Ford, he's pretty fucking great in the original
Yeah.
trilogy, definitely. You know, I think all of them, aside by Return of the Jedi, all of them have become very competent actors. It's just a shame that Return of the Jedi has like the weakest plot of the three. It
Eh,
does. It does. It can be your favorite. I'm just saying that Return of the Jedi has
what
the
were
weakest
they?
plot.
In a sense, but it's also like it's just supposed to be the final battle. Like it's you know, we're not gonna have a big confrontation at the end. Like like
I it's retreading. Return of the Jedi
it is
retread
it is
hard.
it is, but it's
Um,
also just crowd pleasing, but not in a way that's terrible like Rise of Skywalker.
you're only saying that because it's your favorite.
It is my favorite. It's my favorite to watch. It's not the best acted. It's not the best written, but it's the best. It's the most entertaining to watch.
Yeah, it's
And
got a lot of good
honestly,
moments. Yeah.
before Andor, I would say like making Star Wars like legit with acting and writing was almost weird. Like I would argue ham and cheese makes Star Wars. Like that is Star Wars. Star Wars is a cheesy ass thing, and like trying to make something serious out of it is almost a folly. Now you can
Yeah.
go way too hard into the cheese and make it cringe, which is the prequels. But like, you know, a perfectly toasted ham and cheese sandwich is Return of the Jedi, and
Now,
I love it for that.
I'm
But
gonna say
Andor changed my mind. I'm like, oh, you actually could have like decent writing and acting in this and be.
you could have a serious conversation in this world. There's real life and death consequences. It feels like here. Yeah. One thing I am gonna say is Star Wars is late 70s. It's a perfect encapsulation of late 70s fantasy, not science fiction. Fantasy.
Fantasy, yeah.
It's an important distinction. Uh, and it keeps that energy all through the 80s. One of the biggest problems with like the prequels and even the sequels is it forgot that it's essentially 70s fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't have the cheese level and the grime. 70s fantasy had this grime.
Right.
What's that 70, maybe it was the 60s, but what's that 70s Sean Connery and you know, he's in like basically the dude
Oh
bikini.
yeah,
It's like
yeah.
that's
Oh
like
god.
that's 70s just muck, like ball sweat. Duh.
Yeah.
There's that. Okay. That is what made Star Wars have its character. The prequels lost the character, gained, frankly, better acting, worse plot. A lot of it's
right.
the plot in the prequels.
So we still have subscribers.
Way better acting, way better effects. Plot's still not.
Well, here's the thing. Like, before we lose every subscriber, let me just say this. I've always said the prequels are interesting ideas written and directed horribly. And acted horribly too, honestly. Like you are getting career worst performances out of Natalie Portman, and she's a great actress.
Well, because you got to remember, this is the very early times of your acting to a tennis ball.
Right.
There's
Liam
nothing
Neeson,
there around him.
Liam Neeson, same deal. Like, I think Ewan McGregor is the only one who came out acting decent in those movies.
And
Ian
got Riz just falling out of his asshole.
Well, and Ian McDermott in the third one, he was fucking loving it. Like, and that's why I got. But yeah, prequels are good ideas executed horribly. Good ideas written and directed horribly. Sequels, bad ideas
executed wonderfully.
Executed well.
Yeah.
Well directed, well acted, horribly written. Like, just no idea where they're going with this. It is a train off the rails.
I'm not willing to say that it's horribly written without having read the scripts that got greenlit before it went into production. Because
there's a Michael Arndt script, the guy who wrote Little Miss Sunshine, that got thrown out before they went to filming on Force Awakens, and I've always been super curious about that script because apparently it just featured way more of the original characters in the script, in the story involved.
Yeah,
and I'm like, what happened there? Like, I'm really curious because I'm like, I do feel like, yeah, there is. I mean, Episode 7 was a failure from scene 1. Like, we're getting into a Star Wars diatribe here, but that's okay. We're trying to lighten the mood here. Okay, I've said this before, and I think it bears repeating, but the opening shots of Episode 7, the sequel trilogy, failed from scene 1. Scene 1, Act 1, Second 1. And then, you know why? Because it's showing stormtroopers and TIE fighters going onto a desert planet to blow it the fuck up. Because they're looking for data that gets hidden in a droid. It was a failure from the beginning because they reset their universe. And I don't care what the passage of time, blah, blah, blah. You can argue these logistics for it. The point is that Return of the Jedi ended on this point. That is the end of Episode 6 ends here. The start of Episode 7 is here. Regardless of the span of time between the films and in universe time or whatever, all they did was reset it, and it was openly, nakedly, like, greedy why they did this, because they wanted to go back to nostalgia merchandising. They wanted stormtroopers, TIE fighters, and a scary dude in a black costume on those boxes of cereals, on those oranges, on those, kids snack packs. They did this very blatantly. It was very much just, we want to remake without remaking. We're selling it as a sequel, but we bought Star Wars. We immediately want to go back to what everyone loves about Star Wars.
Recapture that magic,
which is TIE Fighter, and I'll agree with the fact that the TIE Fighters actually look cooler in Episode 7 than they did in the original. The black and red is really a good aesthetically. But all that being said, the sequel trilogy was a failure from the beginning because they did not want to continue with the story. They wanted to retell it. And I think that's where it failed immediately, because they weren't interested in actually continuing a story. Disney, and I'm not really putting this on JJ. I'm putting it a little bit on JJ, but I'm going to put it Abrams, chat or listeners, JJ Abrams.
This is specifically JJ's fault.
Like, this is right there. Like, from the beginning, they failed from the beginning because they didn't care about making something new and interesting, which George Lucas wanted to do. Granted, his idea was weird.
It was wild.
It was,
but weird. It would have been that 70s strange.
It would have been very 70s. The force of the wills and going into the micro universe and like doing all kinds of weird stuff like that. George wanted. He said it would have been a very different film. People would have hated it, but it would have been very different. That was George's answer to
look,
his...
As time goes on, every harsh word I've ever said about George Lucas, I find myself revisiting the more the more I dig into that man. That man, he'll know more about one, the business of filmmaking, but two, about like mythos and strange shit. Like that dude's, I don't know. He's like,
he's a weird dude, but weird dude. You need a weird dude to make Star Wars.
not only do you need a weird dude to make Star Wars, but you need a guy that just has no quit in him. And like he just has no quit. Like he's never going to be the guy that sits down on like he's not going to be Peter Jackson on The Hobbit. Like he's never going to sit down and be defeated. Like that dude is an iceberg.
He'll have his really weird tantrums, which
yeah, he'll go on diatribes, but he won't he's not going to quit. And I find myself more and more fascinated by him, especially because think of what he achieved. I wonder if they're ever going to make a movie about what he did, especially considering the friends he had.
You mean not We the People versus George Lucas, but a more like actual interesting in-depth look at his life?
Yeah, because I mean, anybody that says oh, he can't direct at all, well,
American Graffiti exists.
Yeah, American Graffiti, THX 1131 or whatever, or 1138. Yeah, I would say definitely he turned out to be a much better producer than say a writer, definitely. But producing wise, he's fantastic. I mean, Raiders, for instance, is just, and he had the idea where he's like, "Oh, I want to do those pulp pre-reel."
Yeah. I don't know if people know this, but Spielberg wanted to do a Bond film. He was originally looking into seeing if he could get a Bond film made, and George said, "I got a better idea," and he pitched him the whole idea of Indiana Jones. So Indiana Jones is yes, Spielberg directed the first 4 movies, but it's George's idea actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's why Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was where he and Spielberg had the big argument. They had some big argument about it because it's aliens.
Well, George was he learned about the real crystal skulls, and he got real amped about it, and Spielberg was apparently
this is off base here, but he's like, well, we'll make it more like magic. It's like, oh, okay, well, but yeah, we went down a rabbit hole to say that Star Wars games seem like they might be dying for a while,
which might be for the best, because I'd rather they take their time and do something like what that Ubisoft game is. It's being made by the people who made the Avatar game, which again is it's not bad actually. The Avatar game is pretty good. It's one of those okay, this isn't mind blowing.
Star Wars Outlaws, thank you God.
Yeah,
I was gonna call it Renegades 6 times.
Graphically, Avatar is amazing. However, as far as gameplay, whatever, it's kind of it's a little diet Far Cry,
Yeah, you're not going to put 100 hours into it,
but maybe that's but it was co-op the whole way through, and maybe that's just what you want, maybe sometimes I just want to have I just want a Navi simulator. Maybe not a lot, but same with Star Wars Outlaws. Maybe I just want to be a smuggler. Maybe I just want to have that. Maybe it doesn't need the world. Maybe it doesn't need to innovate. The real problem is going to be how much are they spending on this crap? Because circling back to why everyone's getting laid off, spending is ridiculous right now. And I was talking with Max about this last night too. It's we are still feeling the effects of COVID. The pandemic is over, but we are still feeling the effects in the game industry because everything that was sort of in development or slowed down a bit got shitted out in 2023. We had a shit ton of games come out, and we're this is basically the early 2024 is the latter bits of that, right? But everyone's getting laid off because everyone went on a hiring spree during COVID because everyone was at home, and nobody sat there and thought that well, this was unsustainable. Because the thing is, people went back to work, they went back to school, they went back to whatever they did outside, and now the entire world wasn't trapped in their house, in their home, at a screen 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So all of a sudden now people are not buying games as much as they used to. They're not stuck at home. They're not this if things went back,
Yeah.
but they hired so many people, so now they're getting laid off. Now, do I personally think it's understandable? Do I think it's excusable? Absolutely fucking not. Because knowing what these heads of studios, that the publishers, the CEOs, what they're getting paid, what they're taking home, and and how little they're contributing to actual game development,
Yeah.
they should be the ones getting massive pay cuts. They should be the ones getting let go, because the people who decided we needed to greenlight, it's for you, Sony, for example, we need to greenlight 12 live service games. Why? Why the fuck do you need 12 live service games on your own, let alone let's pretend there were no other live service games in the entire industry. Why would you alone need 12 in the next 10 years? Why? That's stupid. That is on its face actually idiotic. Because if you had one successful gas game or two successful live service games,
yeah,
what would be the incentive for people to grind their way out on your other 10? It's so blatantly mind-bogglingly stupid. And these are the people, this was their ideas. This was this was the higher ups, the people who greenlight stuff, who decide to push the button, who write the checks. It was their idea to go down this fucking rabbit hole of stupidity, of having the game industry all jump into gas and live service and cannibalize each other, and all of a sudden not everyone wants to do this for every fucking 3 months. A new live service game come out, everyone jump in. No, they don't. They'll jump in if it's cheap, if it isn't predatory, if it's Helldivers 2, because there were 4 fucking live service games that came out this month. Only one has been successful. And why is it successful? Because it was cheap. You could earn everything in game, and it was very minor things you could even buy anyways. So it earned its place. It did what it needed to do. It was fun to play. It was polished enough. It was easy enough to connect with people, and it didn't have a shit ton of predatory microtransactions. You don't feel any weird FOMO. There's no weird urgency. I have to play the game every day to collect all this stuff, otherwise I miss it forever. It doesn't have any of that. But they're not going to learn that lesson. And the thing is Helldivers is going to be a game where people are going to bounce off it in a month. And you know what? That's going to be fine, because it was you paid $40 to play it. So they made money. And there wasn't really any giant we have to keep playing. We have to keep pumping money into this economy or whatever. So it was made on a dirt old engine that isn't even supported anymore. They specifically said we didn't hire more people. He said the CEO of Arrowhead was like, I think it's a stupid idea to hire a bunch of people when your game's successful, because what happens when the game eventually tapers off? Then we have to fire them. I'm not going to do that. Screw it. I'm just going to make the game. I'm like, wow, genius.
Well, he just described exactly what's happening, and it's coming to everything in the economy, and it's called the bullwhip effect. Google that shit. The short version is that when times are good, we overestimate how good it's going to be into the future. And then when times are bad or even slightly bad, we overestimate how bad it's going to be. And so you get this bullwhip effect that just continues.
Yeah.
And it's the 1970s was one big bullwhip. It was a response to the bullwhip effect. And genuinely, that is where we're at here. You're watching the game industry, but all industries. You can look at lumber if you really want to look into that. But you're watching a bullwhip effect of when the pandemic hit and trillions of dollars got pumped into the economy to keep it going. But 2, everybody was at home on a screen. It's the same way people overnight became successful at YouTube, but then it all dried up and they're having to leave YouTube now. There's this phenomenon on YouTube where they're all like, oh, I quit my job in 2020 because my YouTube took off and I suddenly overnight had 500,000 subscribers and I was doing it, and now I can't get any views at all, just 3 years later. Well, yeah, everybody went back to work. Everybody's busy again and can't watch every single video you're pumping out an hour long. Yeah, when we were all stuck at home, watching an hour-long video was fucking awesome. But now it's nobody I know has an hour to sit down and watch, whatever yeah, I don't know what subject you want to talk about. Philosophy is a big one that did well in.
But yeah,
the.
Yeah, I agree with you there. But yeah, like for me, I'm like, were all these layoffs necessary? No, I don't think so, because I think the people who made the stupid decisions should be the ones getting punished.
They were always going to happen, whether or not it's necessary. I definitely, there's plenty of healthy reasons to have layoffs. There are. That's just the truth. There's plenty of good reasons for layoffs. It frees up talent to move around. It basically prevents stagnation in a company. Like, there are good, healthy reasons to have layoffs. Do I think that's why that's happening now? No, I think it's because they overextended and they want to shore up.
They did overextend, but they don't want to, because there. Who was it? I can't remember which one of the might have been Sony or someone.
They're not going to maximize profits this quarter, so they're going to shore up expenses.
I forget which CEO said, I take personal responsibility, for. I think it was Nike, actually. I think even or
really.
Maybe it was Nike. I don't remember. Maybe not even been gaming, but like the CEO was like, I take personal responsibility for this. This was, I made these bad calls. That's why I have to lay off these people. I'm like, why don't you take a pay cut then? Okay. Oh, you're going to take responsibility, but the other people have to suffer. Man, like just a big collective from someone who's not in the industry, but just looking at it from the outside in. A big collective. Fuck you. Like,
pay isn't
I will
expenses.
I will take responsibility for this. And that is why I am laying you off. But my lifestyle is not going to change. I'm still going to run this company. I'm still going to make all the decisions, and I'm still going to get paid I'm still going to get paid millions of dollars every year. You have to go find another job.
With modern CEOs, they aren't paid in cash most of the time.
Yeah, no, stock.
They'll take a $1 salary, and then they get paid $1 options, which is actually the reason why all the bad decisions happen in the short term, is because it's in their favor.
Everything is a slave to the shareholders and the dividends, the yearly dividends and stuff like that. But so it's just kind of like,
yeah, short-term gains means they get paid more per quarter. And then they actually, what they do is they take out debt against their stock.
The thing
so
is,
they don't
is
even
like,
pay taxes.
The thing is, like, you see a lot of these apology letters coming from all these companies laying people off, and they're always like, they try to be as human. Like, reality is, we tried to do this, but it didn't work. So we're gonna have to we don't take this decision lightly. We deliberated about this. I'm like,
but you tried nothing else.
How about this? Publicly show me exactly how much money you made, exactly how much everyone from the top down is getting paid. And then let's all together publicly look at this company and go, wait, why did okay, so you lost all this money. Let us all be the judge. You want to be all transparent and all buddy with us. How about you publicly show exactly how much money you brought in, exactly how much money is being split up amongst everyone, especially from the top down. And then we'll all sit there and judge, like, yeah, you really needed to lay those people off. Because I guarantee you, I don't think we'd feel that way, especially for someone like Sony or Microsoft.
Well, my favorite thing with the Sony layoffs is that, like, Jim Ryan visited the London studio and said
5 days ago, and then 5 days later shut it down. I saw people arguing he wouldn't have known. He's not high enough. I'm like,
he would have known.
Excuse me?
He would have known. They would have been talking about this 30 to 60 days ago.
See, Chief Executive Officer Jim Ryan wouldn't know, didn't know that. Wow, there is some woof.
He might not have. But the truth of the matter is, they would have been talking about this months ago.
Absolutely.
Like, this
Absolutely.
They don't just do this on a dime.
Like, he decided within a span of 4 days, like, we would say, yeah, it was a great time visiting that studio. Like, a day later, you know what? I'm going to shut the whole thing down. Let's close it down. Let's start writing up severance packages or writing up, of course they knew they were doing this.
Yeah, Jim Ryan might be an asshole. I don't know, but
he's an asshole.
I don't know if he's.
Remember his whole thing about, like, I'm tired of flying, between California and UK, to do my, well, then fucking live in California, you shithead. Like,
yeah, he was flying back like every weekend.
Every week, yeah. Like, he was flying a private jet back and forth. I'm like, because he wouldn't, because he refused to, live where he worked. So fly me a private jet, from one end of the earth to the other. You poor weird lizard man.
That is a really solid spot to end on, Poor Weird Lizard Men. But do you have any final thought to?
Well, I mean, I don't think we have anything new to say about the layoffs, but again, like I personally feel like I don't think I think some of these layoffs, some of these smaller companies may have been necessary, maybe. But there's a big part of me that feels like I don't think that most of these layoffs were necessary. Actually, I think they could have probably kept most of their staff if they'd actually like punished the people who made the poor decision making in the first place. But more again, this goes back to what I've been saying for years. There is a project management crisis.
Yeah.
There is no reason or way games should be costing this much. Like there's got to be a way before people get hired, before things get planned out. There has got to be a better way to plan out, the structure of a game's development life from beginning to end before you start it. I think problems. My stance is that I think project management is in a crisis, and I think projects are not being managed correctly at all, and I think that's what's leading to some of this bloat, some of these long dev cycles, some of like a lot of other weird issues. Like you could go watch like the What Happened series on YouTube from Matt McMuscles, and you hear about this shit all the time.
Yeah.
Where they're like, "Oh, someone decided we needed to change engines mid-development. Someone decided we need to feature scope creep. Where all of a sudden we need to add this. We should put this in the game. Oh, this is really popular now. Put that in the game." It's like that wasn't part of the initial plan design. There's so many times this happens over and over, and it's so frustratingly stupid that this keeps happening in game development, and games have only cost more and more. So making these stupid decisions mid-development is honestly probably what's costing a lot of these big bloated budgets, or what causing these games to go on so long.
Probably why it takes 6 years for a game to come out,
right? Like
instead of 2.
now,
Yeah.
it's like when I look at something and we talk about how like God of War Ragnarok was too long, but like that and Horizon 2 came out within like 4 or 5 years of their first game, and it was just more of the same. But you know what? They probably sat there, planned out, okay, how's the game? We know how the game plays. Like, let's write it out. These are all the areas we're going to have. Let's think about how long will it take to make each area, and then go and make it. And then boom, you had a massively successful but massively high budget game like God of War Ragnarok coming out like 4 years after God of War 2018. Why? Because they knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
Because they didn't sit there and think, oh, well, can we add a microtransaction to the can we add a flying segment? Can we add what if we give Kratos a helicopter, like, or something? Like, no, like
people are really loving this Avatar game. Can we add some soldiers that are in mechs?
Yeah, like just no,
it's
just
a God of War game. Yeah, maybe they're dwarves and mechs.
Yeah, like just
to build the mechanicals.
I have to imagine that
legit.
Something like God of War Ragnarok was exactly the same thing what happened with the last 3 Xenoblade games, which is when the directors decided, I've thought there's going to be this many environments. It's going to take us this long to do a full environment top to bottom. I'm going to plan this, so I'm going to cut it off and say, okay, 10 environments. Each one will take 2 months or whatever. Going to take 20 months to make this. And then I'm going to plan my game off there. I'm not going to add or subtract a damn thing. I lock in my feature. I figure out what my features are going to be. I figure out how many environments I'm going to have, and I'm going to figure out how long that could take. And that we are locked in. Doesn't change. Like, this is the script. Like, I know scripts change on the fly or whatever, but it's like you don't add like another planet to go to in Star Wars mid-production unless it's going really poorly.
Somehow the Emperor returned. No, I mean, I do think a lot of the best films, not all of them, some of them are trash fires that somehow get shaped into being great. But a lot of the best films are films that like they do all their shifting and changing in the writing phase, and then once it's in production, and they just
right, like Fury Road. Like, we storyboarded this film, we worked on it for years, we wrote a whole comic book, giant graphic novel, giant thing of storyboards. Like, this is the movie. We're gonna go out and film that movie.
I'm so afraid that Furiosa is gonna ruin the legacy of that movie.
No, because even if Furiosa sucks a dick, you know what? Fury Road is still gonna be great.
Yeah, I hope. I hope it doesn't sully it. I hope it doesn't.
It won't sully the original. It won't sully the original movie. It'll just be like, oh yeah, that was that really weird prequel no one liked and no one will talk about.
I just whatever it is, and this is my last thing I'm gonna say because I don't want to shit on the movie. I want people to see it, but the trailer is not selling. The trailer's not doing a good job. This is all I'm saying. I'm already hyped to see it because Fury Road was great, and the trailer is.
I feel the same way.
It's weird, but all right, dudes. We have producers to thank. If you're interested in becoming a patron at any level, please check out patreon.com/YoVideogames podcast. Dude of the week was Graviton Dash. Thank you, Graviton Dash. And our producers for this episode are Zybernite. Oh, I lost the page. Zybernite, Mutton Chops Johnson, The Pink Hammer, Screwnomi, Kuroi 35, Hyper Viper 89, Hockey Kong 64, LCL Mayhem, and Ziggy Z. Thank you, dudes, and we will catch you next time.
Later, dudes.